At 6 months pregnant, I found out my husband had a secret wedding with his side chick. His entire family showed up, and I heard them outside my door whispering, "Don't let her find out." I hadn't even made a move yet, but on their way home, they were all in a car accident. While 6 months pregnant, that your husband secretly married another woman, and his entire family was there, whispering outside your door, trying to keep it from you. What they didn't know was that fate had a brutal, immediate twist waiting for them, one that would shatter their world just as mine had been shattered. I was 6 months pregnant when my world imploded. I found out my husband, Finian, had held a grand wedding with another woman, Harper. It wasn't legally registered, but the ceremony itself was lavish, joyful, everything a real wedding should be. And the worst part? Not just the betrayal, but the fact that everyone in his family knew. They dressed in bright colors, laughing and joking with Harper's little girl, praising Finian for being such a capable man, as if it was the happiest day of their lives. But on their way back home, driving under the influence on the highway, they were involved in a terrible accident. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were left in a vegetative state. Finian died at the scene. Days later, Harper came to my door with her child, demanding a share of Finian's estate. I could only smile bitterly. The life insurance policy had named just one beneficiary, me. You see, I never suspected Finian was cheating. He wore the perfect mask of a devoted husband and father. If I craved cake, he'd bring one home right after work. If our son wanted a new toy, no matter the cost, he'd buy it without hesitation. "My wife and son are the most important people in my life," he'd say, wrapping his arms around us, his voice filled with warmth. Even when his parents fell ill, he stayed by their bedside every night without complaint. My own mother would often say, even if he were our own son, he couldn't have done more. So, I trusted him completely. I truly believed that even if every other man in the world was unfaithful, Finian would be the exception. But reality hit me like a cold slap in the face. As early as our 2nd year of marriage, he had started seeing someone else, secretly keeping her around. I would never have known if she hadn't sent me that photo on purpose. In the picture, Finian was standing close beside a woman, both of them holding a little girl who looked just a year younger than our son. It was still dark outside. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching my phone with trembling hands, feeling cold all over. I was 6 months pregnant, and even getting out of bed was a struggle. I looked at the empty space next to me. He had been gone for days on a so-called business trip. He still called every day, asking about our son, about the baby, asking if I had slept well or eaten. His voice was full of concern. But that night, he made a mistake. His phone sent me a photo of the three of them, him, the woman, and the little girl, a family portrait of sorts. He deleted it quickly, but I had already seen it clearly. The intimacy between them was unmistakable. I stayed awake the entire night. Just before dawn, I heard rustling outside the bedroom. "Mom, this dress is too tight. Help me zip it up," came Helena's voice, my sister-in-law. "Oh dear, I haven't even finished putting on my own dress yet." "Hold on a moment," replied my mother-in-law. They were trying to speak softly, assuming I was still asleep, but in the stillness of early morning, their whispers carried clearly into the room. I slowly sat up and glanced at my phone. It was 10 minutes to 5 in the morning. What on earth were they doing at this hour? Feeling a little thirsty, I tried to get out of bed to grab a drink. That's when I heard Helena's voice again, this time even quieter. "Keep your voice down, Mom. Don't let her hear us." I put on my shoes and walked out of the room. As I expected, they were both in the living room, getting dressed in front of the large standing mirror I had placed there for convenience. My mother-in-law was wearing a dark red Chong Sam-style dress, very formal and elegant. Helena had on a flowing pink gown, something one would wear to a wedding. I spoke up. "Mom, Helena, where are you going so early, all dressed up?" They both jumped in surprise and turned around awkwardly. For a moment, they just looked at each other. I gave a small smile. "And why were you whispering about not letting me hear?" My mother-in-law looked away, clearly flustered. Helena gave a laugh, trying to sound casual. "Oh, you must have misheard, sister. I just told Mom to keep her voice down so she wouldn't wake you. Right, Mom?" My mother-in-law nodded quickly. Helena went on. "One of our distant cousins is getting married today. Way out in the countryside. We had to get up early to make the drive. We didn't want to wake you, so we kept it quiet." She spoke with such concern, like she truly cared about not disturbing me. "I see," I nodded, pretending to understand. Then I turned as if a thought had just come to me. "Helena, wait a moment." I went back into my room and brought out a brooch, my favorite one. I pinned it carefully onto her dress. Helena's eyes lit up. "Wow, is this the brooch you always wear, the one you said you love the most?" "That is the one," I said softly. "It goes perfectly with your dress. Makes the whole look more elegant." Helena thanked me warmly. I smiled and told her not to mention it, watching as they stepped out the door. "Drive safe." I called after them gently. Once the door closed and they were finally gone, I returned to my room. I picked up my phone and opened the surveillance app. What Helena didn't know was that brooch was no ordinary pin. It was a hidden camera, small and discreet, a perfect little monitor. It was supposed to be just another workday for me. But that moment, so sudden, so telling, I knew both of them were lying to me. Thinking quickly, I reached for the brooch. It had always been more than a pretty trinket to me, and now it might just prove useful. I had barely begun to open it and take a closer look when I heard a soft, painful moan behind me. It was my son, Jack. I turned around instantly. His cheeks were flushed a deep red, and a wave of panic washed over me. I rushed to get the thermometer and held it under his arm. Moments later, the screen lit up, 103.6 degrees Fahrenheit. He had a dangerously high fever. Frantically, I grabbed my phone, my thoughts racing. My sister-in-law Helena and my mother-in-law had only just left the house. We had 2 cars at home. My husband had already taken one, and unless something changed, the other was likely with Helena and my mother-in-law. I had to act fast. I called Helena first. The phone rang twice before the call was declined. Maybe she was driving. Maybe it was unsafe for her to answer. I tried again, this time dialing my mother-in-law's number. It rang and rang. No answer, not even voicemail. I turned to look at Jack, his little face glowing with fever, his eyes heavy and unfocused. My heart ached. Jack is not like other children. He had suffered a febrile seizure once, and the doctor had warned me in no uncertain terms, never let his temperature get too high. It could be life-threatening. I was out of options. I tried calling Finian, my husband. He was away on a business trip, not too far, just a city over. If he left right now, he could be home in just over an hour. It was not even 5 in the morning yet. There would still be time to get Jack to the hospital and come back. He declined the call. That's when I felt something inside me crack. But Jack couldn't wait. I was 6 months pregnant, struggling to move quickly, and there was no way I could carry Jack on my own. Panicking, I hurried to get him dressed, then ran next door to ask for help. "Sir, could you please help me carry my son to the car?" I asked my neighbor, breathless. The man, always quiet but kind-hearted, wasted no time. He helped me call a cab and gently carried Jack down the stairs, placing him inside the vehicle. "Thank you," I said with all the gratitude I could muster. He waved it off, then glanced behind me with concern. "You're all alone?" he asked. "You're heavily pregnant. It's not safe to go to the hospital by yourself. Where's your husband?" I explained that Finian was out of town and couldn't make it back. The neighbor didn't even stop to grab a coat. He climbed into the car beside me and came along. At the hospital, the doctor examined Jack and said he needed to be admitted for observation. My heart sank. I sat in the hallway, surrounded by the sterile scent of disinfectant, feeling cold and empty. I couldn't help it. I broke down crying. Heaving sobs echoed in the corridor as strangers passed by, casting curious glances. Some even stopped. One kind older woman approached me and asked gently, "Is no one here with you?" I shook my head. Whispers began to rise among the families gathered nearby. "Her husband is unbelievable," one woman said. "His wife is expecting and their son is burning up with fever, yet he's nowhere to be seen. If my husband ever did that to me, I'd rather stay single than have kids with him." Another added, "She must really love him." Someone else muttered, "To go through all this and still carry his second child, that takes guts." Their words pierced me. My neighbor returned with a cup of water. "Here, drink a little. It will be all right. Don't panic," he said. I took the water, my hands trembling. "Thank you. Truly, I really don't know what I would have done without you today," I said. "Don't worry about it," he replied. But just before leaving, he added, "Still, maybe it's time to call your husband again. A job is never more important than his wife and children." That sentence echoed in my ears long after he had gone. I stared at my phone for a moment before finally dialing Finian again. This time he picked up. "Hello, honey." His voice came through, mixed with background noise, laughter, music, conversation. Strange, considering it was just past 6 in the morning. "Where are you right now?" I asked instinctively. There was a pause. "I was just helping a friend out," he said after a beat. "I missed your calls earlier." "What's going on? What kind of help?" I pressed. He chuckled nervously. "Why, you sound upset. What happened?" He was dodging the question. "Our son has a high fever," I said, my voice already breaking. "He is in danger. I need you to come home." There was another moment of silence. Then Finian answered, his voice uncertain. "Honey, I really can't leave right now. How about I call Helena? She can come to the hospital and stay with you. Would that help?" I opened my mouth to respond. But just then, I heard a woman's voice on the other end of the line. Finian quickly hung up, but not before I caught her words. She said, "Fine, your daughter." Then silence. I froze. He has a daughter. Finian and I had been married for 5 years. We had only one son. I was still pregnant with our second child. That woman's child was his. As I sat there in that cold hospital, my hands still clutching the phone, I felt the world around me shift. And I remembered. He said he would call Helena. So I opened the surveillance app on my phone. As expected, Finian made the call. He simply told Helena to come to the hospital and help me take care of the child. Her voice came through clearly from the surveillance camera, sharp and unmistakably irritated. "Are you out of your mind, brother?" Helena said. "Mom and I are on our way to your wedding. How do you expect me to stop everything and run to the hospital with her? And besides," she added with a scoff, "I told you already, your wife is such a drama queen. It's just a little fever. Does that really call for a trip to the hospital?" Her tone was biting, almost like a woman scolding her husband. The anger in her voice poured out, far from the sweet, harmless face she usually put on in front of me. Then she hung up, clearly annoyed. Back in her car, Helena kept driving as she gently chatted with the little girl in the back seat. "Sweetheart," she cooed, "your daddy is really something. He sneaked away to marry your mom, and now he still lets that woman boss him around. Honestly, I feel bad for your mommy." It hit me like a bolt of lightning. A wedding. So that was where Helena and my mother-in-law were headed to attend a wedding, my husband's wedding. And that sweet little girl? She was Nain's daughter, his lover's child. They all knew. Every single one of them. They knew Finian had a mistress. They knew he had fathered a child with her. And yet here I was, heavily pregnant, sitting in a cold hospital hallway, trying to soothe our feverish son alone. Everyone else was dressed in joy, preparing for a wedding. I stayed still, frozen in place, then suddenly let out a laugh. It was sharp, hollow, the kind of laugh that rolls straight into tears. A child nearby caught sight of me and shrank behind her mother, pointing timidly. "Mommy, look," she whispered. "Why is that lady laughing and crying at the same time?" The woman clutched her daughter close and hurried away. "Come on, don't stare," she said. "Leave the crazy woman alone." My phone screen had been open the whole time. What Helena didn't realize was that the little brooch pinned to her blouse was a live camera. Everything, her words, their faces, even the wedding preparations, was being streamed directly to me. They arrived at the venue shortly after. Finian and Nain stepped forward to greet them, smiling warmly. "Mom, Helena, thank you both so much for coming all this way," Finian said, his tone full of affection. Nain beamed like a bride should, greeting her mother-in-law and sister-in-law as if they had always been her family. She carried herself like the rightful wife, not a trace of shame. As I listened to them chat on the way, I started to piece things together. Nain had grown tired of hiding, of living without a title. Since I was from the city and rarely visited the countryside, Finian's mother had come up with what she thought was a perfect solution. They would hold the wedding in his hometown. No legal paperwork, but at least it would be a ceremony, some sort of recognition. And Finian? He agreed. Nain stayed close to Helena, always smiling, always trying to win her over with flattery. She was clearly desperate to win her approval. The camera had her whole face in frame. I stared at it for a long time, unable to look away. To be honest, I had assumed if my husband were ever to cheat on me, he would have picked someone beautiful, someone more elegant than me. But Nain, if I passed her on the street, I might have called her Madam out of respect for her age. I couldn't understand what Finian saw in her. Then I remembered something strange. Finian always had this odd dependence on me, like a child needing his mother. I had thought it was just a part of our bond, something harmless. But now I saw it differently. It seemed he had a deeper craving, one that blurred boundaries. As the guests mingled, Finian walked over and grinned. "Come on, let the relatives take their seats. The ceremony is about to begin." I couldn't stop staring at him. This man I had once held each night, who had whispered promises into my ear, now, he looked only at Nain. His eyes, once so tender with me, were soft and glowing with affection for her. It felt like 1,000 ants were crawling through my chest. I could barely breathe. So this wasn't a special look meant only for me. He had said he loved me, held me close. And yet all the while, he was with another woman, loving her, sleeping with her, building a family behind my back, even marrying her. The ceremony began not long after. Even through the screen, I could feel the warmth, the buzz of excitement. Helena must have been standing near the front. Her camera gave me a clear view of the stage. Finian and Nain stood together, bathed in light, surrounded by smiling guests. They looked so happy. The officiant invited Finian to kiss the bride. My eyes burned red, but I kept them locked on the screen. Finian turned, smiling, and gently wrapped his arms around Nain. He leaned in, slow and sweet. The crowd erupted in cheers as their lips met. The kiss lingered. They held each other tightly. Tears streamed down my face. I began taking screenshots like a madwoman, capturing every image, every moment of betrayal. Then I turned off my phone screen. Whatever happened next, I no longer wanted to know. This marriage must end. I sat on the hospital corridor bench, staring blankly into space. Jack was still in critical condition. I felt completely helpless. I finally reached for my phone and dialed my mother's number. "Mom," I said in a trembling voice, "can you come to the hospital? Jack has a high fever. It's really bad." I couldn't finish my sentence. The tears came all at once, and I burst into uncontrollable sobs. My mother answered quickly and told me she would take a cab right away. I went to the restroom to wash my face. When she arrived, I didn't want her to see me like this, so drained and disheveled. I looked into the mirror. My eyes were hollow, my face pale and swollen from the pregnancy. I forced a bitter smile. But as I turned to leave, lost in thought, I didn't notice the water on the floor. My foot slipped. The fall was hard. Sharp pain shot through my lower body. And then the blood came. I gasped, panic gripping me. "Help! Help me, please." Just as I cried out, a nurse who had come into the restroom saw me and rushed to call for emergency support. They got me onto a stretcher and wheeled me into the ER immediately. The prognosis was not good. The fall had caused severe trauma. The doctor's voice was heavy when he said, "There is no fetal heartbeat. We need to perform a termination." While I was in the operating room, my mother paced up and down the hallway, her heart breaking with every step. She was already getting on in years, and here I was still causing her this much worry. It made me feel unbearable guilt. When the doctor finally wheeled me out of surgery, my mother's eyes were red and swollen. She rushed to my side and held my hand tightly. "Fiona," she said with trembling lips, "are you all right, sweetheart? You poor child." I shook my head slowly. My voice was weak. "Where's Jack?" She pointed toward the room next door. "He is all right now. The fever has broken, and they are giving him fluids." I let out a long breath of relief. As long as Jack was safe, I could survive anything. My mother stayed beside me, gently dabbing her eyes with her sleeve again and again. "It's such a shame. The baby was already 6 months along." Then she suddenly asked, "Where is Finian? Why was he not here to take care of you? Especially with the baby almost due." Her words stabbed straight into my chest. I could barely breathe. The only images in my mind were of Finian holding that other woman in his arms at their wedding ceremony, kissing her tenderly. It made my stomach turn. "Mom," I whispered, "maybe this child just wasn't meant to be." I looked away. Maybe even the baby knew that being born into this world would only bring him suffering. My mother frowned. "Fiona, is Finian seeing someone else?" I nodded slowly, the corners of my mouth curling into a bitter smile. "They all went to the countryside today," I said quietly. "For the wedding?" My mother froze. "Wedding? Whose wedding?" "Finian's," I said, "and the woman he has been hiding all this time." My mother's face turned pale with anger. She stood up, ready to storm out and confront them all. I quickly grabbed her hand. "Mom, don't," I said. "It's not worth it. I have already decided. I am going to divorce him." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression full of sorrow, then sighed deeply. She didn't argue. She just nodded. When Jack was well enough, the doctor gave us some medication, and we went home together. My mother stayed with us. The house felt so quiet, almost hollow. Night was falling. No one from that other family had returned. After dinner, while my mother played with Jack, I started going through our financial documents. First, I found the deed for our marital home. My parents had initially planned to help with the down payment, but Finian insisted on treating it as a loan. He worked hard and got promoted quickly, even doubling his salary. In less than 2 years, he had repaid my parents in full. My father thought highly of him, said he was responsible and dependable, the kind of man you could trust through any hardship. His mother and sister had come from the countryside to visit during the summer. They said it was too hot back home, so they stayed in our apartment. A few days became weeks and then over a month. Still, I had barely contributed to the house financially. So I thought we would just wait for Finian to return before deciding how to divide everything. Then there were the savings we had built up over the years, our joint account, the bank cards, the education fund for Jack. I was the one who studied economics, so I had always managed the investments and financial planning. I knew every detail better than Finian did. Just as I was calculating the numbers, my phone rang. "Hello," said a firm voice on the other end. "This is the police. Are you a family member of Finian Harper?" My heart dropped. The calculator slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a sharp click. Was there a car accident?" I asked. My voice didn't even sound like my own. It felt like I was watching it all from a distance, as if this were someone else's nightmare, but it was mine. What a surreal day it had been. The voice on the other end of the phone was calm, almost too certain. "Yes, there was an accident on the highway today at approximately 5:20 in the afternoon," the officer said. "The cause was drunk driving. Your husband, Finian Harper, died at the scene. The other 2 passengers were seriously injured." Even after the call ended, I stood there frozen. Finian was gone. My eyes drifted to the documents I had just been organizing, the ones about our assets and finances. There would be no need for a division now. There was no one left to divide anything with. It wasn't until the next day that I finally made it to the hospital. A police officer handed me a cardboard box filled with Finian's belongings. These were found in the car. Everything has been transferred to you, he said gently. He glanced through the window into the intensive care unit. The two others, your mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I believe, are in very poor condition. The doctors say if they don't wake up soon, they may fall into a permanent vegetative state. I nodded slowly, my mind sluggish. The officer seemed to notice my dazed expression. I am sorry for your loss, he said softly before walking away. Only after he left did I finally gather the courage to walk into the ward and see them. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law lay motionless, surrounded by machines. I should have felt only grief. But mixed in with the sadness was something else, something much more complicated. Just days ago, I had lost the baby, a stillbirth. The baby had died in my womb. If they had not all gone to Finian's secret wedding with that woman, perhaps none of this would have happened. But there are no ifs in life. Neighbors and distant relatives, unaware of the full story, came to visit me one after another. They brought fruit baskets and flowers and wore expressions full of sympathy and sorrow. Poor Fiona, one woman whispered behind my back. She had such a good life. And now, just like that, a widow, said another. I heard the baby. She lost it too. All from the stress, someone else added with a sigh. Life always breaks where it is weakest, came the solemn reply. To them, I was the very picture of misfortune. But behind closed doors, I sat down and pulled out the insurance documents I had stored away over the years. I had studied economics in college, so I took insurance seriously. In our household, I had made sure we were all covered. Health insurance, life insurance, accident, you name it, we had it. I always said, if your insurance is strong, you don't need much savings. Now all those policies were finally useful. The car was totaled in the crash. Between the auto insurance, life policies, and accident coverage, the payout was substantial. When I tallied up the total, the final figure left me staring in disbelief. I never imagined that the greatest windfall of my life would come from my husband's death. I took care of Finian's arrangements myself. His body was cremated. A grave was purchased. Everything done properly and with dignity. As for my mother-in-law, I had no legal obligation to support her. And Helena, my sister-in-law, was even less my concern. I called my father-in-law and informed him plainly, you will need to come collect them. What you decide from here is your choice. Whether to continue treatment or bring them home, it is not my responsibility anymore. He fell silent for a moment. Then his voice turned angry. Fiona, have you no heart? That is your husband's mother and sister. You will not spend a penny? You are just going to walk away. At first, I had considered saving face for their sake. But hearing his tone, I gave a bitter laugh. Let's be honest, shall we? You of all people know I am not your only daughter-in-law. He hesitated. His eyes darted to the side, avoiding mine. I continued, letting my anger rise. On the very day I lost my baby, were you not all gathered at Finian and Nain's wedding? A whole ceremony, dressed up, celebrating? So don't come to me now with lectures about family. You all made your choice. You stopped seeing me as family long ago. I didn't report Finian for bigamy, I added, only because of the years we shared. But that does not mean I will carry the burden you left behind. The crowd of visiting neighbors and relatives began to whisper. My father-in-law's face turned pale. He looked like he wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. As for me, I turned and walked away. I left the hospital behind. I was finished with all of them. When the insurance payout arrived, I took my son, Jack, to eat at Kentucky Fried Chicken. He sat across from me, his cheeks full of food, happy and content. Mommy, he asked, where is Daddy? I paused for a moment, then gently said, Daddy went on a long trip, far away. He will not be back for a long time. Jack looked down at his fries, a little sad. Seeing him like that, I realized I couldn't keep up the lie forever. We had bought this home because it was close to our old jobs. Back then, I was still working and not yet pregnant. But now, with Finian gone and no job to return to, staying in that house felt suffocating. Every corner held memories I no longer wanted to carry. So I decided to sell it. With that money, I would take Jack somewhere better, somewhere with fresh air and good schools, somewhere we could start over. Because now, my responsibility was not just to survive, but to give my son a better life. I told my mother everything over the phone. She listened quietly and in the end said she supported me completely. Selling the house went more smoothly than I expected. Several interested buyers came to view it, and one of them seemed especially eager. We were just about to close the deal when Nain showed up on my doorstep. With her daughter in tow, she barged into my home like a storm, shouting and causing a scene. Her voice echoed through the hallway loud and chaotic, sending the buyer running off in fear. Then, as if that weren't enough, she threw herself on the floor and refused to leave. I kept my voice firm and cold. What are you doing? If you don't leave right now, I will call the police. Nain's face, already lined with wrinkles, twisted with a sneer. She narrowed her eyes at me and scoffed, you can't scare me with that police talk. She snapped, I am Finian's woman. This little girl is his biological daughter, and we were married too. You know, I heard about his accident on the highway, and I know the insurance company paid out a big sum of money. I let out a dry laugh. So that was it. She came for the money. I stood there silent, watching her throw her tantrum like a circus performer desperate for attention. Calmly, I slipped my phone from my pocket and began recording. Her little girl, frightened by the noise and her mother shouting, burst into tears in the corner. Nain didn't even glance at her. She was too focused on yelling at me. If you don't agree to split the money with me, she shrieked, then I am not leaving. I will stay right here all day. I let out a cold laugh and reached for a broom. If everyone acted like you, using tantrums to get their way, what would we need the law for? I said, waving the broom to usher her toward the door. Besides, where do you think you are, barging into my house like this? My husband is gone, and I am the only legal beneficiary on the insurance papers. Nain tried to cling to the door frame as I pushed her out. Her grip was tight. Don't think that just because you are young and have a son that I cannot deal with you, she hissed. I have proof. I have evidence. She whipped out her phone and played an audio clip. Finian's voice, slurred and clearly drunk, came through the speaker. Nain, don't worry. I will take care of you and the baby. No matter where I go, I will always support you both. Nain looked smug, as if she had just won the battle. Then she showed me a video, one I had seen before, a clip from what appeared to be their wedding ceremony. I didn't bother watching it again. Instead, I calmly dialed building management. There is someone causing a disturbance here, I said. Nain saw that I was unmoved and her expression darkened. She glared at me and said, Fiona, don't think I will just back down. We were both Finian's wives. The compensation should be shared equally. She crossed her arms and added, so what if you have a marriage certificate and I don't? I nearly laughed out loud. Nain, I said, trying not to smile, you really should study the law. This is not just about a piece of paper. I could report Finian for bigamy. Your so-called wedding does not count. You were nothing more than his secret mistress, and all the money he gave you? That was part of our marital assets. If I want to, I can go to court and get it back. As I finished speaking, Nain's face turned pale. You lying witch, she screamed and lunged at me, trying to grab my hair. Before she could even touch me, security and staff from the building rushed in and held her back. What do you think you are doing? One of the guards barked. They quickly escorted her and her daughter out. Before leaving, one of the staff members turned to me and apologized. Madam, we are so sorry about this. We should have been more careful. We promise this will not happen again. I nodded, watching as they finally removed her from the premises. At last, peace returned. In the following days, I wrapped things up quickly. I negotiated with another buyer, settled on a fair price, and sold the house. With the money, I enrolled my son, Jack, in the best school in the area. I also bought a cozy 2-bedroom apartment, just enough for the two of us. The rest of the money I tucked away safely. Some went into a small business venture. Jack and I finally had a stable, peaceful life. But Nain wasn't done. Somehow she got hold of my phone number. She began calling me from different numbers, harassing me and demanding half of the insurance payout. When I refused, she threatened me. I had already saved all her messages and the recordings. I sent everything straight to the police. After that, she never contacted me again. Jack grew up fast. One day, when I went to pick him up from school, I saw a group of boys blocking his way, mocking him for not having a father. But Jack stood his ground. He answered them calmly and clearly, leaving the bullies speechless and red-faced. My mother once encouraged me to consider marrying again, but I always shook my head. I had finally regained the freedom I used to have before marriage. I was savoring it, not rushing to give it up again. Losing a husband had felt unbearable at first, the pain, the betrayal, the loneliness. But looking back now, I wonder if it wasn't a hidden blessing after all. Over time, our small apartment began to feel like a real home. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but it was filled with warmth. The living room walls were soon covered in Jack's colorful drawings, some of superheroes, others of the two of us holding hands under a big yellow sun. On the fridge, I pinned every school achievement he brought back, no matter how small. A gold star for good behavior, a certificate for reading the most books, a crayon picture with I love mom scrolled across the bottom. Mornings were our favorite time of day. Jack would tiptoe into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, still half asleep, and I would already have breakfast waiting, warm oatmeal, a boiled egg, and a slice of toast with his favorite strawberry jam. We would sit by the window, watching the world wake up together. Sometimes he would ask questions that made me pause. Mom, do you ever get scared? He asked one morning. I looked at him and smiled, of course. But being brave means doing things even when you're scared. He thought about that for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then I think you're the bravest person I know. Evenings were peaceful. After dinner, we would curl up on the couch with a book. Jack loved adventure stories about animals that talked, children who found hidden doors, or magic that changed everything. I would read aloud, and he would hang on to every word, his eyes wide with wonder. Sundays were for the little traditions we made our own. Sometimes we baked cookies, our hands messy with flour and chocolate chips. Other times we went to the library, where Jack would run between shelves with excitement, carefully selecting new stories to take home. And when the weather was nice, we would walk hand in hand to the park, where he liked to race the wind and shout into the sky. Money was tight, but I learned how to stretch every dollar. I packed our lunches with care, mended clothes by hand, and found joy in small things: a sale at the market, a neighbor sharing fresh fruit, a quiet evening after a long day. Holidays were simple but full of laughter. On Christmas, we decorated our little tree with homemade ornaments and string lights. Jack made paper snowflakes and taped them to the windows. On his birthday, I blew up balloons after he went to sleep and surprised him with pancakes shaped like animals. He laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. Through it all, I never felt alone. Jack was my sunshine, my anchor, my reason to keep going, and he was growing up so fast. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I heard him talking to himself in the next room. Peeking in, I saw him tucking a teddy bear into bed and whispering, "Don't worry, Mommy always keeps us safe." I quietly stepped back, my heart full. Years passed gently. The wounds from the past faded, leaving behind quiet strength. I no longer woke up in fear or doubt. My days were no longer shadowed by someone else's choices. They were shaped by love, by resilience, by the bond between a mother and her child. And in that, I found everything I had ever needed.